right. Welcome to another episode of the Original Minds podcast. My name is Tobias Dahlberg, and today I am here with Russell Raath, who is one of the partners at Original Minds, and we're going to talk about Nike. We're going to talk about some other things, but first of all, welcome, Russell.
Hey, thanks, Tobias. It's good to be here. We've been talking about doing this for a long time, so I'm glad we're getting to do it now.
Yes, finally. I know you've been traveling. You just came back from Australia. You were in Canada, I think, twice. Like, what's going on? What's
Yeah,
with
it's
all the
crazy.
travel?
I've got some terrific clients. We're doing some amazing work. I was in Canada, out in Edmonton, with a client that's really making waves in the energy transition space, and then went out to Australia and had a fantastic time. Actually, we were working in the Blue Mountains, just outside of Sydney. And then I got to Sydney, and I love Sydney because it's just it doesn't matter what time of year. It's just a beautiful place to be in. As you know, because I visited you in Helsinki, and I love outdoor swimming. They've got just the most incredible array of outdoor swimming pools. So I got to do some really great outdoor swimming in some of the pools that were there. And then came back via Canada and went to Banff and spent better part of a week in Banff. And that was great too.
Wow.
Just seeing it's just incredible. The mountains that have been there, we had a guide who told us they were there for they've been there for sort of 130 million years.
Wow.
And there's an element of just humility when you think about something that's been standing for 130 million years. And here we are getting all worked up about the news today or whatever. So it's an interesting perspective.
Yes. No, that's very cool. And I'm very jealous. I was standing in this studio most of that time when you were traveling. So before we get into this, so this is the first in a line of episodes that we're going to touch upon current events, and we're going to talk about a lot of stuff around consulting and helping clients. In particular, we're talking about what you call organizational performance. So can you elaborate a little bit on what that is and what your kind of career trajectory, or what's your, not trajectory, but what's your career path, and who is Russell Raath? So for people that don't know you.
Yeah, happy to. I'll try and keep it tight, although I've done a lot of things in a lot of places. Look, I think the role of any leadership team is to optimize their organization. They exist, an organization exists to add value in the world, and to do that value for compensation, for a fee, for what they sell. And so the role of that team is to optimize the organization and get the most from the resources that they have, and deliver that in the best way to clients that want it, to customers that want it. So whether you are, I've written a lot lately about Starbucks. So whether you're Starbucks selling coffee, or whether you are Microsoft selling hardware and software that enables all of us to work around the world, or whether you're an ice cream shop, selling ice cream to holidaymakers, the point of it is that somebody's coming to you because you have something of value. And when I look at organizational performance, it's the role that leaders and managers play in helping to make sure that it is performing at its best. So it's not going to be caught out by something that happens in the by competitors moving in and suddenly doing something and upending their market. AI is a great example, right? So I was actually with Microsoft a couple of months ago in Washington State. And the team that we were working with is all about the team that distributes the hardware. So it's the entire supply chain, incredibly complex. If you think about tablets and devices that get made and manufactured and shipped around the world. And Microsoft have now introduced, of course, they are a big partner with ChatGPT, OpenAI. And so introducing AI into their hardware like they have now done, we were working with a supply chain team that makes the devices, and yet they were being impacted by change that was being made by another division of their own company, Microsoft. So multiple layers there, but ultimately this is all about how organizations respond and how they do it really, really well. And I think I was blessed, right? I started my career working out in mining, gold mining in Africa. And part of the observation was that when you're working in something that was, at that point at least, very low tech, high intensive, labor intensive, you start looking and understanding and appreciating something called a value chain. Now, a lot of people don't even think about what a value chain is. And certainly if you're a business advisor, you should know what a value chain is. But it's the fact that at every step of the journey, as something moves, an idea or a concept moves through the company, everything that touches it should add value. And if you can add that value at the lowest possible cost, you can still maintain a high enough margin that makes your product attractive to the market. And so I approach everything I do with a view of looking at it from the perspective of a value chain. is what we're doing actually helping to add value to this product, or is it getting in the way? We can talk about meetings at another time, but if you just think for a moment about how many meetings happen in an organization, and then calculate the cost of all of those meetings, that's a very real cost. So if you want to try and optimize your organization and impact your value chain, one of the questions you could simply ask is, do we need to have this many meetings? And do we need to have this many people in this many meetings? Because you could probably recoup a couple hundred or even a couple $1 million just by looking at how much time gets spent in meetings, for instance. I've worked in Africa, I've worked in Asia, I've worked in Europe, I've worked in Latin America. So I've worked around the globe, obviously North America too. I've
Which
run
is
a
where you live right
consulting
now, right?
business. Yeah. I live on the East Coast of the US. I started my own consulting firm after having been with Deloitte in New York and having run a boutique firm for a esteemed Harvard professor out of Cambridge for about 10 years. And I started my own business and loving the opportunity to do in a sort of boundless way what I do, which is tethered to my own thinking, my own clients, and being able to do work that I believe delivers an impact. So I love what I do.
Yeah, I know that. You're a very passionate person. Every time I speak to you, you're like on the airport, getting in a plane, or at some beautiful location, or with your family. So it definitely looks like you're living kind of the life of a boundless consultant. So today we decided we'll talk about Nike. Nike's been in the headlines, and I want to ask you a little bit why and what you think is going on. Like, I remember, because when I started my career many years ago, this was about 2005, 2007. I worked for Nike for about 2 years. I visited Portland. I visited all these different places around the world. Nike for me was almost like religion. Like I still talk about my amazing experience, the culture at Nike. It was very competitive, but it was also fantastic. And so it's kind of etched in my brain. And so can you speak about like what's going on there? They changed out the CEO, and what's the implication of that, and what lies underneath that? What's your take on what's going on with Nike right now?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's in the news for all the wrong reasons. Whether it's missing out on major sponsorships with certain athletes, but it's an interesting story. The CEO, you're right, has just been a new CEO has just been announced. The board made the change. The former CEO, now former CEO Donahue, came in around 2022, and let's think about what had happened just preceding when he came in. We just had COVID. We just had the global, pandemic, and the move. None of us were shopping in retail. We were shopping online, and so all of the data pointed to the fact that retail was shifting online. And what he did is he doubled down on their efforts to go direct to consumer. So in 2022, you saw retail sales increasing by about 7%, hitting 26% of sales direct to consumer, which was great, right? Previously, it had been below 20. It's now up to 26. So that's great. Big investment. But what they also did is they eliminated what they called the middlemen. Now, I think you've got to be careful with language. It matters. But when you've had, let's remember, before 2022, 85% of their products were not direct to consumer. In other words, they were sold through these middlemen, through retailers.
Yeah.
So they were more than middlemen. They were actually an integral part of their entire ecosystem. But when they decided to double down on direct to consumer, they, I think, made the first of a number of flawed assumptions. And that was that, like work from home, the way of shopping has changed irreversibly and will not go back, right? So they calculated that the digital age was upon us and would so be forever, and no one was going to go back to a shopping mall. So they eliminated those middlemen. And when I say eliminated, they really fractured some of those relationships. The biggest middle person in the US was Foot Locker.
Yeah.
And the CEO of Foot Locker at one point came out and said it's just astonishing how Nike have killed the relationship they have with us. And so what they would do is direct people to their website. Now, if you're going to do that, you've got to have a website that works really well. Those of us that have been around sort of any element of e-commerce know that you've got to have a shopping experience. You've got to have the omnipresence where I don't know what that shoe feels like. And I don't know if if the fit is going to be too tight or too small or too wide or whatever. But if you're relying on me simply to buy online, I'm not 100% sure that $100, $150, $200 sneakers is kind of going to be perfect for me. And I don't know that I want to buy 4 pairs and send 3 back, which is what a lot of people try to do, because maybe my credit card won't allow me to buy 4 pairs. So they banked on an assumption that this was the future of retail. Now, we know what's happening with the future of work right now. Amazon have just called everyone back 5 days a week, but they're an outlier. Most places are still hybrid. But unlike work from home, what has happened in e-commerce is that people are going back into stores, and it kind of came back far faster than people thought it would. So he came in. He was a former consultant. I think he'd been at BCG maybe, and he really doubled down. They built this incredible e-commerce infrastructure that was great. But what if you're Foot Locker, and in 2022 you suddenly find your supply of inventory gets whittled down because Nike don't want to partner with you anymore? What are you going to do? Well, they're going to reach out to Reebok and Puma and Adidas and Hoka and On and all these others to fill the space. And all these other guys saw the opportunity and went, well, yes, we'll support your store. We'll put product in your store. And they actually went further. A couple of the smaller brands, Hoka in particular, started showing up at running clubs, certainly in the US, and I'm sure probably elsewhere too. And they'd show up at running clubs and they'd hand out sneakers. And what Nike has always been about is this culture where it's about athletes celebrating great athletics. It's not been about the shoe in some respects. I mean, it has been about the shoe, but the Air Jordan's called the Air Jordan because it's about Jordan. And so when they lost focus on the athlete, Hoka and others saw this opportunity to double down and build a relationship with the athletes. And running has always been a core part of Nike. And all of a sudden you had runners going into running stores saying, I'd like to test Hokas. I'd like to try out some of the Ons or whatever else it was. So they really lost that. And when you move into a world where you're relying on analytics and data and digital, and you're doing that instead of the relationship you have with your consumers, so almost to replace that, well, then you've lost, because ultimately Nike's never been about a product. It's been about a brand.
Yeah.
It's been about an experience.
Right.
And I think that's one of the big things that's happened.
Yeah. So what you're saying, so they lost connection with the consumer, but also because they lost connection with the the buyers, with the big retail chains, right? Right. Yeah. And I remember, like, this was, again, like a long time ago. It was at the time when Phil Knight actually made a multi-billion-dollar decision not to sell to Walmart or any other markets, or what do you call them in the US? I guess you call it
distributor, retailer.
Like the Walmarts of the world. And it was a multi-billion decision that they basically like a 10 billion decision or something. And he said he's doing that because he wants to build a brand. Because it's easy when you sell, and it's one order, you sell the kind of bottom of the line, but it's a massive sacrifice. But he did that to build a brand, and it seems like decisions that were made after that haven't really been in line with that. But again, we're listening to what you're saying. It sounds like it kind of made sense from a data point of view, but it sounds like the human element perhaps has been lost. Is that a correct assessment? Or?
Well, it was interesting. There was an analyst, and I've got a quote up here. I'm going to read the quote, because this analyst said, about Donahue, who's the CEO. Now, he's a really smart guy, and he's done a lot of really interesting stuff previously. If I'm not mistaken, I think he might have been at eBay at one point and did some sort of turnaround work there. I'm not suggesting he came into turnaround, but there was an element where Nike needed to kind of remain relevant, right? And one of these analysts wrote, he just didn't understand that Nike's value came from being more than a brand. It's an experience, right? So it's not just about selling shoes, it's about building a lifestyle and a culture. And data, while powerful, can't capture that essence. And I think he felt that it was simply, that the consumer would absolutely love Nike enough that if they went into a store. Now, there's an interesting parallel here. Best Buy is a big retailer in the US and up in Canada. And in about 2012, they were facing a little bit of an existential threat, because what people would do is go to Best Buy, they would look at a TV, or, and they sell electronics, right? So they'd look at a TV or a stereo system or something, and they'd see it and they'd go, oh, I prefer that one. The 4K on that one's better than this one, or the size is better, whatever. Because it's hard to imagine how big a TV is if you're looking at a website, right, on your little laptop or even on your phone. How do you imagine that? So they would go into Best Buy, they would do some of that shop flooring where they'd walk around, and then they'd go onto Amazon and buy it. And so the existential threat that Best Buy were facing was like, if we don't get our act together, we're just going to become, at best, a showroom for Amazon. And so what they did is they'd really doubled down on obviously doing all the stuff you need to do, like matching price, matching delivery speed, and they've been exceptional. Electronics I tend to prefer to buy from Best Buy because I feel like I'm supporting the underdog, but the service is better. I can actually talk to someone.
Yeah.
What happened here is that they believed that by going digital only and not having a place where anyone could actually touch the product and feel the product and see the poster of, this athlete, just that infuses you with a sense of aspiration or drive or ambition or determination. Not seeing all of that wouldn't be a problem because you wanted the shoe enough. But the demographic that loved Nike is aging, right? And you now have competitors in the textile space, in the clothing space, like Lululemon. You have others that are making really good clothes. So people used to be all Nike: a cap, a sweatshirt, a hoodie, a sweatpants, and shoes, right? Now that's not the case. You've got Aloe, who's got this huge yoga themed brand that's moved in massively, particularly in the women's space, but also in the men's a little bit.
I have some
So
aloe.
Nike,
I'll confess.
yeah, I do. Yeah, great hoodies. They're great.
Yeah.
We should do a hoodie episode one day.
Yeah.
But you've got them. They've come in and taken away, like eaten away at the apparel side of it. The shoe side of it, like, you get to the point where if you aren't coming out with the innovation, and for a long time it was all about the air, right? And what they'd done, the technology around that. But if you've created the space now for Hoka and for On to come in and demonstrate that they're just as good, it's, and there's nothing compelling about Nike other than a swoosh, but most people are 2 or 3 generations away from how that was founded and the story, and it's just another brand now. And then you have the really fast fashion stuff coming out of China and elsewhere in Asia and China. There is a part of the population that cares about how these things are made and so won't support a sweatshop. But there's also a part of the population that wants fast fashion. And if Nike can't be relevant and get it out and get it in front of people fast enough, it becomes an aging demographic. And I think I saw some data that suggested that the consumption of Nike products is now skewing older, which is not a good sign for a retailer that wants to remain relevant.
Yeah. That's very interesting for somebody my age. I mean, obviously somebody who worked for Nike, the brand is so etched into my brain that I think of it as like, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. Like last time I walked into, I think it was Paris, the Nike store, it was an amazing experience.
I know it. I can picture it. I've got it in my mind.
Yeah, and it's an amazing experience because they actually integrate the app and the retail experience very well. But that's a controlled environment, and what you're saying essentially is like the other distribution, which is actually because Foot Locker is the biggest account that I know, in the world for them. Then you have Decathlon and these other in France and other countries, and they're major in terms of sales. But if you think about, from your perspective, how you help your clients, what would you do if Nike called upon you? Like, where would you start? How would you sort of deal with this? Well, can you give some advice in terms of what would you do if Nike asked you for help?
Nike called me. Or when Nike called me.
When
what's
they call you, obviously.
What's interesting is that I think what happened here is it's a classic case of following the wrong playbook and making some wrong assumptions. And we talked about those earlier. There's another quick parallel, and I'll give you my answer. But JCPenney is a big retailer in the US, and they do mostly in malls. And they had a very, 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 very loyal following of people who would take a coupon and show it at checkout and get sort of a reduction in the value of what they were buying. Whether the apparel had been marked up, I mean, of course, it's a bit of a game to some degree, but you feel like you're getting a deal. And in gosh, mid-20s, maybe 2010, 2012, somewhere around there, maybe even a bit later. JCPenney hired a CEO from Apple. Ron Johnson came into Apple. He had been a part of the Apple retail machine. And of course, those stores have the highest revenue per square foot of any store in the world. And those stores all have, you can walk into one in Helsinki, you walk into one in New York, they'll be the same. The same aesthetic, the same table, the same layout, the same design, the same shirts on the people who wear them, everything, right? It's clean, it works. It's getting a bit busy and noisy now, so they're trying to figure that out. But the point was, the guy from Apple, who's dealing with the highest revenue per square foot product and store in the world, comes over to JCPenney, which is arguably a discount retailer. And he figures that what he can do is take the JCPenney playbook and replace it with the Apple playbook, which is about premium. We never sell. There's no discounts. There's definitely no coupons, right? And what he does is he alienates the customer that's going into JCPenney because he didn't understand the core customer, didn't understand the core consumer. And I think what happened here is Donahue came in with a mandate to rev up sales, grab the digital wave, which he did. But the decision to exit retail completely was really, really flawed because they didn't understand their consumer. Innovation has slowed, and I'm friends with a couple of people who we've been exchanging some insights, people who formerly worked there. And the morale and the energy within Nike is really, really not good at the moment. People feel the other thing that happened is there was a lot of cost cutting that happened as an element of, we're in the middle of COVID when people are not buying our shoes enough. Although you would have thought, right, through COVID that people are outdoors running and it would have been a perfect opportunity to come up with the COVID sneaker or something. Or maybe that's not a good catchy phrase, but anyway, you would have thought that it would have been a good opportunity. And instead they cut significant cost. Well, what that did is it sent everybody, now this is where I get into organization performance. That sent everybody who is responsible for optimizing that value chain, not just the supply chain, but the whole value chain, into a tailspin. You had people wondering whether they were going to be laid off because their best friends had just been laid off. And you're right. You talked about this. It was sort of a tough environment in the sense that standards were high and you had to perform. But people have started to feel really anxious about their jobs. They feel like the same work is being done by fewer people. So now they're being burdened. They don't love their jobs as much as they did. The culture internally is not great at all. And Nike has for years had what they call a Just Do It Day, right? JDR Day. And it was a day when they would celebrate what had been accomplished. And it used to be quite a big production that have artists come in and perform and whatever. Well, it was canceled this year. Now, when your brand is Just Do It and you cancel Just Do It Day, you're actually signaling, I think, quite predominantly to the world, to the market, certainly to your employees, that something's not working. And I think the biggest opportunity that they have is obviously on a number of fronts to fix the distribution strategy. They have to get back into retail. They have to. I read an anecdote that there's a running store in Portland, Oregon that doesn't even carry Nike anymore. Right? This is in Portland, Oregon. This is in Nike's hometown in Beaverton. So you've got to get connected to your core consumer. You've got to hire people who love to run and have them join running clubs and take sneakers with them and give them out to people who are struggling. And maybe they have lost some edge, so they've got to fix the innovation part of the sneaker too. But you've got to connect with that consumer. Certainly a young consumer who's going to want to wear Nike for the next 10, 20 years. So I would figure out a way to get into, colleges, and they do a lot of promo stuff, of course, but to show an athlete at the Olympics wearing Nike is great, right? Because it's an endorsement of your product. But you want tomorrow's athlete to be wearing Nike too. And so you've got to get in front of those early athletes as they're trying. So they've got to fix distribution. They've got to have a far deeper connection, I believe, to their consumer across whatever they do deem to be the most important demographics. They're not a huge player in they're a big player in certainly some sports, but if I think about others, like, whether it's football, not American football, but soccer, football, Nike is not the dominant player in a sport that's one of the biggest in the world. So could they double down and sort of really go deep there like they did in basketball with Air Jordan? And then probably, though, superseding all of that, Tobias, I would say that there's an opportunity for them to really, really fix their internal operations. Like they've got to get morale up.
Yeah.
They've got to get people feeling like they're on a winning team again. You've got to have an element of ambition. I always talk about how you need ambition before strategy, because you've got to have a drive, a desire, a determination to get somewhere that then fuels the strategy of what you do to get there. So the team have got to feel like they're getting back on top. It's probably not a bad thing that they've been knocked from the top, because it gives them something to fight for if they want to fight for it and go after it. But the new CEO who's just come in is a veteran of Nike. He's been at Nike, I think, on his LinkedIn resume, it's just got Nike, Nike, Nike for like 30 years. He started as an intern and he's only ever been there. So there is some observation that a returning CEO, someone who was a CEO, then left and came back, a returning CEO is never as successful as a CEO the first time around, right? There's some great data to support that. He wasn't, Elliot Hill, who's coming in, wasn't the CEO before, but I do have a question about whether he's actually going to be able to be radical enough, because he's been shaped in the culture and the values that Nike has espoused up until now. So is he able to actually be the catalyst for change internally that Nike needs? Or is he going to really try and sort of placate the culture and not push people too far? Yeah. And I think Nike deserves a shakeup. I think it's going to be an interesting story to see. I just hope he's able to shake it up significantly.
Yeah. Well, love that. Thanks so much, Russell. I mean, I'm a Nike fan. I'm definitely rooting for them. I suppose you are too. Yeah. This was great. Thanks so much for the analysis. And anyone watching this, I would love to hear your comments. We'd love to start a conversation. Please engage. We're going to provide some links here. Also, if you want to engage with Russell, myself, work with Russell, we're going to provide some links here. Original Minds, we are a global collective of consultants, creative minds working together, collaborating. If you need help, again, click the links below. Thank you so much, Russell. It was great having you. We're going to do more of this, right? Are we?
Yeah, yes? Without question. And one thing you should just add, I mean, as part of Original Minds, we have fun. You know, one of the biggest challenges if you're working as a consultant somewhere is like, how do you get in a room with other people who might be thinking differently about a problem and just validate your solution or validate your thinking or validate your pricing even? You know? How do you do that? But we have great fun, and yes, we're going to do much more of this.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, if you're a consultant listening to this, just go to originalmindsmembers.com and check it out. You can read more about what membership in Original Minds looks like. But thank you so much, Russell. We're going to do more of this for sure. It was a great talk. I loved the way you laid that out. Very impressive. Terrific. Good stuff.
Hey, thanks, Tobias. See you soon.
Yes, we'll end the episode. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Make sure you subscribe, like, share, all that good stuff. And if you support what we're doing, we want to get this message out, and we're going to bring on other people as well, internal, external members of Original Minds, and just to take on current topics, and who knows what we'll do in the future. This was the first one we did. Again, thanks, Russell, and see you next time.
See you soon. Bye.